Returning to Winter Harbor felt like stepping into a dream, only the kind where you're always waiting for something to go wrong. The air was cool, the kind of cold that you'll always find on the coast of Maine. Sunlight broke through the clouds here and there, casting patches of light over the vast, empty mansion that loomed ahead. The St. George estate. I hadn't been there in 7 years, but the memories never really left me. I walked along the cracked path, Shady limping slowly at my side. She was old now, my best friend from childhood, but she still had that glimmer of loyalty in her brown eyes even though she was struggling. She'd been with me through everything. I only wished I could be there better for her. The estate's sprawling lawn was overgrown, the windows dark, and the mansion's once grand facade was now weathered, peeling like old paint. This place used to be alive in the summers when the Smiths were in town. Barbecues, laughter, and the smell of the ocean. It felt like forever ago when my parents worked here, and I spent my days running around with Richard. I hadn't seen Richard since I was 12, right before everything changed. We were best friends back then, inseparable during those hot summer days. His family was rich, mine wasn't. But when you're kids, that doesn't matter much. We built forts in the woods, chased each other across the estate, and got into more trouble than we could manage. I still remember him laughing, his face always lit up with excitement, his energy boundless. But then there was the fire. The back house, a small building tucked away behind the main estate, went up in flames one night. The fire spread so quickly, choking the air with thick smoke. I thought I was going to die, and honestly, I probably would have if it hadn't been for Elijah. Elijah was the first ghost I'd ever seen. I didn't know it at the time, of course. To me, he was just an older boy, a kind, gentle teen with a farmhand's build and a sad smile. He couldn't physically pull me out of the house, so he coaxed me. It might not seem like much in hindsight, but I don't think I would have moved from that spot if it weren't for him. This wasn't the first time I saw him or the others, but I wish I knew it was going to be the last. The structure didn't burn entirely that day. That's why I came back. Shady whined softly beside me, pulling me back to the present. I knelt down, rubbing her head. As I stood back up, my eyes drifted toward the back of the estate. There, beyond the overgrown hedge line, was the back house. It looked even worse than I remembered, its roof sagging in the middle, the windows dirty and cracked. Even the repairs after the first fire already appeared old. But it wasn't the decay that made me uneasy. It was the sense of familiarity it still held. I could almost feel Chester's presence now, like the air was thickening around me, pressing down on my chest. He was the real terror of St. George Estate, the ghost that controlled everything and everyone inside its walls. The other spirits, Elijah included, were bound to him, trapped. And Chester hated me. He had since I was a kid. Then I couldn't stop thinking about Richard. It was stupid, really. Over the years, I'd thought about him more than I should have. Obsessively, even. In my head, I kept playing out the same scenario meeting again after all this time. Him seeing me for who I really was now. As if he would even remember me. As I reached the edge of the property, the wind picked up. Each step was harder than the last. The gasoline sloshed in the container as I walked across the uneven ground, Shady dragging behind me. I couldn't help but feel guilty for dragging her back here. She deserved to be somewhere warm, somewhere safe, somewhere I couldn't provide. The moment I stepped into the overgrown yard, the air shifted. It was subtle, like the temperature dropped a few degrees. I stopped, feeling a presence nearby. I expected it, but that didn't stop the hair on the back of my neck from standing up. "Elijah," I whispered, and just like that he was there. He appeared like he always did, suddenly and without sound. His eyes, bright and filled with a sadness I could never quite understand, locked onto mine. His dark hair was pushed back messily, his face smudged with dirt, like he'd just come in from the fields. The same way he looked when he died. The part which shocked me the most was back then he appeared to be about 5 years older than me. Now he looked a few years younger. "Carter," he said softly, his voice barely more than a whisper, but the sound of it made my chest tighten. Shady let out a soft whine, her tail wagging weakly, and Elijah smiled at her before his gaze shifted back to me. I couldn't help but smile back. Despite everything, despite the fact that I was here with a gasoline container, ready to burn this place down, seeing Elijah made me feel a little less alone. He smiled brightly, but his eyes flicked down to the container in my hand, and his expression darkened. "Carter, what are you doing?" I didn't answer right away. How could I explain it? How could I tell him that I'd been haunted by this place for years? That I couldn't move on because I knew he was still trapped, suffering under Chester's control? I owed him everything. If it weren't for Elijah, I would have died in that fire. I would have been one of those nameless spirits wandering the halls of the estate forever. "I came back for you," I said finally, my voice thick with emotion. "I came back to finish it, to free you, to free all of you." Elijah's eyes went wide, and he took a step back, his face pale even for a ghost. "Carter, no. You can't. It's too dangerous." "I have to," I insisted. "I can't just walk away again." He shook his head, panic flashing in his eyes. "You don't understand. If you fail again, he'll come for you." "I don't care," I shot back even though I did. I was terrified, but I'd come this far, and I couldn't back out. Elijah stepped closer, his eyes pleading. "He's stronger than you think. He can hurt you." "I know what Chester can do," I said. "I've seen it. I've lived through it." "You're wrong," Elijah said. "You don't know. If he finds out what you're planning, he already knows," I said quietly. I could feel Chester's presence lurking just beyond the edge of my awareness. Elijah's expression crumpled, fear and frustration warring in his eyes. "Please, Carter. Don't do this." "I have to." Elijah stood there for a moment. He wanted to argue, to plead more. But then, finally, he nodded. "Just be careful," he said. "Please." I swallowed hard. "I will." But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. Nothing about this first-degree arson was going to be careful. Nothing about this felonious activity was going to be safe. Yes, I was crazy. Batshit insane. Good thing Shady and I were all alone. No one to disappoint. I turned away from Elijah. Shady followed close behind. She was always with me, no matter how bad things got. The back house was only a few steps away now, and with every step, the air seemed to grow colder, heavier. I crouched down by the base of the front door, fumbling through the weeds and dirt until I found a small rock, half buried in the earth. I turned it over, and there it was, the rusty key underneath. Just like I remembered. This was where I used to sneak into the back house, years ago, when Richard and I were too young and too stupid to understand the danger. I picked up the key and slid it into the lock, my hand shaking just enough that I had to steady myself before turning it. As the lock clicked open, I heard a voice, soft and low, almost a whisper, carried on the breeze. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I knew that voice. It was the same voice I heard in the fire all those years ago. Chester. I spun around, my eyes darting across the yard, but there was no one there. The wind rustled the leaves, but I couldn't see him. "Carter." His disembodied voice again, closer this time. I clenched my jaw and shoved the door open, stepping inside the back house before I could lose my nerve. The smell hit me immediately. Dust and mildew, mixed with the faint scent of something rotten. The small house was exactly as I remembered it. The furniture was old and crumbling, covered in dust and decay. I stepped inside the main room, checking for any sign of life. There were none, of course. No one lived here for decades. But it didn't feel empty. Shady's growl brought me back to the moment. She was standing in the doorway, her hackles raised, her lips curled back to reveal her teeth. I reached down to calm her, but just as my hand brushed her fur, the temperature in the room plummeted. And there he was. Chester. He appeared in the corner of the room, his form barely visible but unmistakable. His face was sharp, almost skeletal, and his eyes, those cold, black eyes, locked onto mine with a sickening intensity. His smile twisted at the edges, cruel and mocking. "You've grown," he said, his voice like nails scraping across stone. "But you're still the same, aren't you?" My feet felt glued to the floor as he stepped forward, his form flickering like a broken projection. Shady let out another growl, but I could hear the fear in her throat. "You've been through a lot," Chester continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I can see it in you. The things you've lost. The things you'll never get back." He stopped just a few feet away from me. His smile widened as he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You've lost the love of your parents. Bravo." My stomach twisted. He knew. Somehow, he always knew exactly what to say to make you feel like the smallest, most worthless person alive. "They couldn't love you for what you are," Chester continued, his eyes gleaming with malice. 16 years old, and you threw it all away with your queer weirdness. That's why you've been running ever since, isn't it? Why you live on the streets like the stray dogs you've become. No one will ever love you, Carter. No one will ever care. His words hit like a punch to the gut, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. He wasn't telling me anything I hadn't already thought about myself, but hearing it out loud, from him, felt like being stripped bare. Shady barked, snapping me out of my daze, and I took a step back, forcing myself to breathe. Chester just laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You're all alone, Carter. Just like you deserve." Before I could say anything, Elijah appeared in the doorway, his face twisted with fear. "Leave him alone." Elijah's voice was full of desperation as he stepped between me and Chester. "Please." Chester's smile faded, his eyes narrowing as he turned his gaze on Elijah. "You're still here?" he sneered. "Pathetic. After all these years, still clinging to this boy like he matters." "He does," Elijah said firmly, his jaw clenched. "We all do." Chester let out a low, sinister laugh. "You think he's going to free you? You think he can save anyone? He can't even save himself." I stood there, my hands shaking, Elijah's presence barely enough to hold me together. I could feel the gasoline container growing heavier in my grip. "I'm not scared of you anymore," I said, though the words sounded hollow, even to me. Chester's smile returned, wider, darker. "We'll see." With that, he disappeared. Elijah turned to me, his face pale, his eyes wide. "Carter, you have to leave," he said urgently. "Now, before it's too late." But I shook my head, the gasoline container still in my hand. "I can't," I whispered. "I have to finish this." My hands trembled as I unscrewed the cap of the gasoline container. The pungent smell filled the small space, overwhelming the stale air and the decay that had overtaken the house. With shaky breaths, I started pouring the gas over the old wooden floors, the brittle furniture, and the walls that had seen too much. Elijah hovered nearby, his face a mask of worry and sadness. He didn't want this, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. Deep down, he wanted to be free, just like all the others. They all wanted it. I emptied the last of the gasoline near an old, tattered couch in the corner of the room. The fabric was stained and torn, the stuffing peeking through in patches. I stared at it for a moment, the matchbox clutched in my hand, my thumb brushing over the edge of the match. Shady let out a low growl behind me. She looked at me with those deep, tired eyes, her body tense with anticipation. She knew, just like I did, that there was no turning back now. I struck the match, watching as the small flame flared to life, casting flickering images across the room. Just as I was about to let it fall, a chill ran down my spine. Something was wrong. I could feel it, deep in my gut. The air grew even colder, and the light from the match seemed to dim, as if being swallowed by the darkness around us. The room was suddenly full. All the trapped souls appeared silently. They all wanted to be free of Chester's hold. Even Elijah deep down wanted the same thing. He just wouldn't say it out loud. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as the flame flickered dangerously close to going out. For a brief moment, Doubt crept into my mind. But then I looked at Elijah. His face was filled with pain, the years of torment etched into every line of his expression. He had been trapped here for so long, held prisoner by Chester's cruelty. I couldn't let him suffer anymore. I couldn't let any of them suffer. I took a deep breath and let the match drop. The flame hit the soaked fabric of the old couch, and instantly, fire raced across it, consuming it in a matter of seconds. Flames erupted from the cushions, spreading quickly along the floor, licking up the walls. The heat hit me like a wave, intense and suffocating, and I stumbled back, covering my mouth as smoke started to fill the room. The ghosts, those trapped souls, didn't move. They just watched. Some of them looked relieved, others terrified. But all of them were frozen in place, as if they couldn't believe it was finally happening. The flames spread rapidly. Shady barked frantically, pulling at my pant leg, her instincts telling her to run. "Carter!" Elijah's voice cut through the roar of the fire, and I turned to see him standing by the doorway, his eyes wide with panic. The firelight danced across his face. He was yelling at me to leave, to run before it was too late. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw Richard. He appeared out of nowhere, bursting through the back door, his face twisted in confusion and fear as he looked around at the chaos. My heart dropped into my stomach. I didn't expect him there. "Carter!" he shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the flames. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. I could see the shock in his expression, the disbelief. The smoke thickened, swirling around him, choking the air from his lungs. He doubled over, coughing violently, his face pale as he stumbled through the room, disoriented and gasping for breath. The flames were closing in fast. "Richard!" I screamed, but the sound was drowned out by the deafening roar of the fire. I had to get him out of there. Shady barked again, urging me to move. I glanced at Elijah, who was watching helplessly, his face twisted with guilt. He couldn't save us from this. No one could. Without thinking, I ran toward Richard. I grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I yelled, my voice raw from the smoke. "We have to get out of here!" But as we stumbled toward the exit, I heard a loud, deafening crack as the ceiling above us began to give way. The fire spread too fast, and the house couldn't take it anymore. The world was a blur of fire and smoke. The heat was unbearable, and I could hear nothing but the roar of the flames and a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I blinked through the smoke, trying to make sense of the chaos around me. But everything was disjointed, surreal, like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My body ached, my limbs heavy, but I forced myself to move. My fingers dug into the scorched earth, and as I tried to push myself up, a sharp pain shot through my chest. I gasped, the acrid smoke burning my throat, and it was only then that I remembered. I wasn't alone. "Richard," I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. I turned my head and saw him lying a few feet away, his body twisted in the dirt, half covered in debris from the back house. His face was pale, his eyes wide and glassy, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he struggled to breathe. I crawled toward him, each movement sending a fresh wave of pain through my body. The heat was suffocating, and the air was thick with smoke, but I couldn't leave him. I had to get him out. I grabbed his arm, pulling him toward me with what little strength I had left. He coughed, the sound wet and desperate. But he was alive. His skin was slick with sweat and soot, and I could see the panic in his eyes as he struggled to focus on me. I coughed again, the smoke burning my lungs, and forced myself to stand. My legs felt weak, trembling beneath me as I grabbed Richard under the arms and pulled him toward the edge of the clearing. Shady was there, limping beside us, her eyes wide with fear. She barked once, a low, frantic sound. Behind us, the back house was completely engulfed in flames, the fire tearing through it like a ravenous beast. The roof collapsed, and the walls were crumbling in on themselves, consumed by the inferno. But I couldn't stop. We made it to the tree line, and I collapsed beside him, my chest heaving with exhaustion. But it wasn't over. "Carter!" Richard's voice was weak, barely a whisper. "Why?" I looked down at him, my heart breaking. I had to, I whispered, my voice cracking. I had to stop him. Richard's brow furrowed, his confusion deepening. Stop who? His voice was laced with desperation, like he was trying to make sense of something that didn't fit. Chester, I said, my throat tight. The house. It wasn't safe. I couldn't let him keep hurting people. Richard's face twisted, and for a moment I thought he might yell, might scream at me for everything I had done. But instead he just closed his eyes, his body shaking with silent sobs. I didn't know what he knew of Chester, of Elijah and the others. But it was his summer home once, and he spent more time there than I had. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered, his voice breaking. Why didn't you just tell me? I didn't have an answer, not one that would make any of this better. I thought I could do this on my own, that I could come back and fix everything. Suddenly, there was a loud crack from the house, and I whipped my head around just in time to see the remains collapse inward. The flames shot up into the night sky, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world was on fire. The heat washed over us in waves, and I shielded my face, trying to protect Richard from the worst of it. And then, just as quickly as it began, everything went silent. The fire still raged, but the roar of the flames seemed distant now, like it was happening in another world. I turned back to Richard, my heart pounding in my chest, and saw the fear in his eyes. Shady, he whispered, his voice so faint I could barely hear him. My blood ran cold. I spun around, my eyes scanning the clearing, and then I saw her. Shady lay motionless a few feet away, her black fur matted with soot, her body still. Too still. She didn't move. Her body was warm, but there was no life in her. No wagging tail, no excited bark. Just stillness. Shady, I whispered, my voice breaking as the weight of it crashed down on me. She was gone. My only constant, my only true companion. Gone. Tears blurred my vision, and I felt like the world tilted on its axis, spinning out of control. I reached out and touched her soft fur. I'm so sorry, I choked, my voice barely audible. I'm so sorry. Shady was gone, but she was everything. I felt myself slipping, the world fading around me, and the last thing I heard was Richard's voice, pleading with me. Carter! Carter! His voice saying my name became more distant. I woke up in a haze, my body heavy and sore. The world around me felt distant, muffled, like I was floating somewhere between sleep and reality. My mind was slow to catch up, and for a moment, I wasn't sure where I was or what happened. Then I remembered, the fire, the explosion, Richard, Shady. My eyes shot open and I tried to sit up. I couldn't. My chest ached and my lungs burned with every breath. I was in a bed, soft and warm, covered in crisp white sheets that smelled faintly of lavender. The room was dim, only the soft glow of morning light filtering in through thick curtains. Carter. It was Elijah, standing in the corner of the room. But he didn't look like the ghost I remembered. Pale, gaunt, and forever stuck in a state of restless sadness. He looked whole. His cheeks were colorful, his eyes bright and warm. He wasn't transparent, no longer a flicker of the past. He looked almost human. Elijah? He smiled softly, stepping closer. You did it. I blinked, trying to process his words. The fire, the back house, the explosion. It worked? Was Chester gone? You mean, you're free? I asked, my voice hoarse. Elijah nodded, his expression bittersweet. All of us. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a heavy weight in my chest. Shady. Elijah's face softened. There's really no way to save anything, but sometimes we end up exactly where we need to be. I frowned, confused. What do you mean? Elijah gestured toward the floor, and when I looked, my breath caught in my throat. Shady jumped up next to me as a younger pup, her black fur gleaming, her eyes bright and full of life. She was wagging her tail, just like she used to when she was young. But something was different. I couldn't feel the bed shift beneath her, couldn't feel the warmth of her body. But still, she looked happy, her tail thumping against the sheets. I reached out, my hand hovering over her. I couldn't touch her, couldn't feel her fur between my fingers. But she was there, in spirit. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "I'm so sorry." Elijah knelt beside me, his voice gentle. "You gave her a good life, and now, she's on to the next part." I looked up at him, the tears blurring my vision. "Will I see her again? And you?" Elijah smiled softly. "Maybe. I don't know. But I hope so." I wiped my face and nodded. He reached out, placing a hand near my cheek. "Thank you." For a moment, I felt a warmth in my chest, a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. But it was fleeting, and as I blinked, Elijah began to fade, his figure shimmering like a mirage. "I'll miss you," I whispered. He smiled, his voice soft as he began to vanish. "Goodbye, Carter. Be happy." And then he was gone. I stared at the empty space where he had been, my heart heavy but strangely at peace. I reached out one last time toward Shady, even though I knew I couldn't touch her either. "Goodbye, girl," I said. Her tail thumped once more before she too faded into the air, leaving me alone in the room. I laid there for a long time, trying to process everything that happened. The fire, the ghosts, the loss. It all felt so surreal, like a dream I couldn't quite shake. But there was no denying what I lost. Just as I was about to lie back down, the door creaked open, and I turned to see Richard standing there. His face was pale, but he was alive. The sight of him filled me with relief, though I couldn't ignore the guilt gnawing at me. He stepped inside, his expression a mix of worry and confusion. "You're awake," he said, his voice soft but tense. I tried to sit up straighter, wincing at the pain in my ribs. "Richard, I'm so sorry. For everything." He moved closer, his brow furrowed, but there was no anger in his eyes, just concern. I lowered my head, my fingers clutching the edge of the blanket. I had to stop him. I had to try. I couldn't live another day knowing what their existence was like. Richard sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed beside me. He didn't say anything at first, just stared down at his hands. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he reached out and placed his hand over mine, squeezing gently. Outside of the things I had to do to survive, it had been years since I felt this kind of touch from another person. It was overwhelming. "You should have told me," he said. I looked up at him, tears stinging my eyes. "I didn't want to drag you into this. I didn't want you to get hurt." Richard shook his head, his voice firm but gentle. "I've been hurt before." My heart ached at his words, and I felt the tears spill over again. Richard's grip tightened, and he leaned closer, his voice soft. "I'm here." I swallowed hard, my chest tight. "Someone's got to pay for this. I can't go to jail. Just let me go. I'll leave. I won't come back, and I won't do it again." But before I could move, Richard grabbed my arm, firm but gentle. His eyes locked onto mine. "Don't go," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Please, don't go. I need to know you again." I stared at him. For a moment, the world seemed to fall away, and it was just the two of us. Richard, holding on to me like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. "I won't," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'll stay, if you really want me to." He smiled with glossed eyes. "I've imagined what this would be like since we were kids. It's amazing, and it also kind of sucks. I'm sorry about Shady. I'm sorry about your family's house." We both smiled. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I was wanted. I closed my eyes and hoped that maybe, finally, the worst parts of my life were over.